They say you're innocent until proven guilty, unless you're black. Then sometimes, all it takes is just being there for someone to decide you're a suspect. But what happens when the man they try to check is the one who's actually in charge? Stick around, because this is one of those rare moments where power flips in an instant, and a cop learns the hard way that he picked the wrong person. This isn't a story about flashing lights, sirens, or someone getting thrown in the back of a squad car. It's not loud, it's not chaotic. It's quiet, and that's what makes it hit harder. It's about a regular workday, a man on the clock doing his job, until someone with a badge decides to rewrite the script. And when that happens, the question becomes, who actually holds the power here? The one wearing the uniform, or the one who doesn't even have to raise his voice to put that uniform in check? Picture this. It's mid-afternoon. The sun's still high enough that light, pouring through the front windows, you can hear the faint hum of an air conditioner somewhere in the building. The place smells faintly like coffee from the pot someone brewed earlier that morning. Behind the counter is David. He's not new here. He's not just passing through. He's been at this job long enough to know every corner of the place. The squeaky floorboard near the back, the desk drawer that sticks if you close it too hard, the one customer who always tries to haggle down prices even though it never works. David's wearing his work shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to keep cool. He's halfway through updating some paperwork when the glass door swings open. And in walks Officer Reynolds. Reynolds doesn't stroll in like a customer or even like someone making a casual visit. No, he enters like a man who's already decided what's happening before it's even begun. There's a kind of posture some cops have when they think they're about to handle something. Shoulders squared, chin slightly raised, eyes sweeping the room not to take it in but to size it up. And then his gaze lands on David. Now here's the thing, Reynolds doesn't ask if David works there. Doesn't start with, "Hey, can I speak to the manager?" or "I'm here for a routine check." Instead, his first word is an order. ID. Not "could I see your ID?" Not "do you have ID on you?" Just ID, sharp and clipped, like he's talking to someone already caught doing something wrong. David blinks, still holding his pen. "Excuse me." "ID," Reynolds repeats, hand half raised like he's ready to take it the second it appears. No explanation, no cause, no polite introduction. And right there, before David even decides what to do, you can already feel the imbalance. Because when an officer demands something without reason, the message is, "I'm in control here." And for too many black men in America, that's where the danger begins. David wasn't some random guy Reynolds could steamroll over. He'd been in this job for years, respected, trusted. He'd built relationships with clients and coworkers alike. People knew him as the guy who could fix problems, who kept things running smoothly no matter what came through the door. But there's something else about David that Reynolds didn't know. David wasn't just an employee. He carried federal credentials, real high-level clearance for the work he did outside of this business. The kind that required background checks, interviews, and the trust of people far above a city cop's pay grade. In other words, David's life wasn't one that could be neatly summed up by the assumptions Reynolds was walking in with. Reynolds had been on the force for over a decade. He wasn't a rookie, and he wasn't known for being gentle. By the book is what he'd call himself. But in reality, that book tended to get applied differently depending on who was in front of him. To Reynolds, certain cars, certain clothes, certain faces just fit a profile. And he'd built his whole career on trusting those instincts, even when they were dead wrong. People in the community knew him. Some avoided him. Some outright disliked him. But one thing was consistent. If Reynolds thought you didn't belong, he was going to make you prove otherwise. And that's exactly the energy he brought through that door. David puts his pen down. Not quickly, not like someone startled into submission. He places it down gently, parallel to the edge of the paper, a small act that says I'm still in control of my space. He doesn't rush, doesn't panic. He doesn't drop his gaze or fumble like a guilty man. Instead, he looks Reynolds straight in the eye and asks a single word. Why? It's quiet, calm, but it lands with weight. Because why is a dangerous word in moments like this. Why takes the neat little script that Reynolds walked in with and flips it over. Why is an invitation to explain himself. And explanations mean accountability. Reynolds wasn't expecting it. He came in expecting compliance, like so many times before. That's how these encounters usually go. The badge speaks and the other person listens. Simple, efficient, unquestioned. But David isn't giving him the yes, sir, he's used to. Reynolds' jaw tightens. His eyes flick away for a split second toward the door, toward the counter, like maybe there's a sign, some justification he can point to. But there's nothing, just him, just David, just the question. The silence hangs in the air, and in that moment the whole room feels smaller. The faint hum of the air conditioner suddenly sounds louder. Somewhere in the back, a chair creaks. A loose screw in the doorframe clicks as it settles. All the tiny background noises you'd normally ignore start filling the space where Reynolds' answer should be. Finally, he says it. Routine, need to make sure you belong here. That sentence, those 5 words, make sure you belong here, are what black men in America have been hearing in one form or another for generations. Sometimes it's direct like now. Sometimes it's softer, wrapped in politeness, can I help you, when they really mean what are you doing here? Sometimes it's suspicion dressed up as curiosity, do you live around here? But it's always the same message underneath. Prove to me that you have a right to stand where you're standing. David hears more in those words than Reynolds probably even realizes he's saying. He hears echoes of news headlines. He hears the stories of men stopped for walking in their own neighborhoods, of women followed around stores because someone decided they look suspicious. He hears the sound of generations having to carry receipts, utility bills, or work IDs, not because they needed them for their own use, but because at any moment someone might demand proof they belonged. And now here it is playing out again, at his own job, in a place where his name is on paperwork where he has keys to the front door. Reynolds shifts his weight. His boots squeak against the floor, a sound that usually makes people nervous. David stays still. Not frozen, not stiff, just steady, like a tree in the wind. Because David knows something Reynolds doesn't. When you move too fast, they see it as guilt. When you get too loud, they call it aggression. When you do nothing at all, they think you're hiding something. The trick, if you can even call it that, is to be calm enough to make them uncomfortable. Routine, David repeats, letting the word hang. Yeah, Reynolds says, his voice firmer now, as if doubling down will make it true. He gestures vaguely toward the door, like he's checking everyone. But the truth is, he walked straight to David without glancing at anyone else. David notices. David always notices. In his mind, David runs through the possible outcomes. Option 1, hand over his driver's license. That's the quick exit most people would take, but experience tells him that sometimes it doesn't end there. They run your name, they find something small, maybe an old ticket you already paid. They hold you for verification. Suddenly, your shift over and you're explaining yourself at a police station. Option 2, refuse outright. That's a gamble. It could trigger a power trip. And when someone with a badge decides you're being uncooperative, the next step is rarely good. Option 3, make Reynolds explain himself. That's the one David chooses, because it's the one where the balance of power can shift. Reynolds doesn't like it. You can see it in the way he squares his shoulders a little more, in the way his lips press into a thinner line. This isn't how it's supposed to go. To him, this was supposed to be a 30-second stop. Ask for ID, get ID, leave. Instead, it's turning into a slow, careful exchange, where he's the one having to justify his presence. David leans back just slightly, not enough to look casual, but enough to show he's not intimidated. "You sure you're in the right place?" David asks. His tone is even, but there's a sharpness underneath, like a thin blade hidden in a soft case. Reynolds' eyes narrow. "This is where I'm supposed to be," he says. David tilts his head, just enough to make it clear he doesn't buy it. This is the part of an interaction where many people fold. The tension is uncomfortable. You want it over, but David knows something that keeps him steady. Discomfort is often the first sign that the other side is losing ground. So he lets the pause stretch. If silence is a weapon, David wields it like a professional. Reynolds shifts again. His hand moves near his belt, not to draw anything but enough to remind David, "I'm armed." David's eyes flick to the movement, then back up to Reynolds' face, and his expression doesn't change. In that moment, David isn't just thinking about himself. He's thinking about every time he's seen this happen to someone else, people who didn't have the protection he has, who didn't get the chance to turn the tables. He's thinking about his younger cousins, about the talks older relatives gave him as a teenager. Keep your hands visible. Don't talk back. Call someone as soon as you can. He's thinking about how messed up it is that those talks are a rite of passage for black kids. And he's thinking about how, right now, he has an opportunity to flip the script, at least for himself, at least for this moment. Reynolds clears his throat, as if to reassert his authority. "Just show me your ID, and we'll be done here." David doesn't move. "Funny thing about that," he says slowly. "You're asking me to prove I belong in my own workplace. Meanwhile, I don't know who you are besides a badge and a uniform." It's not loud, it's not aggressive, but it's the kind of statement that gets under the skin, because it points out the imbalance that's been there all along. For the first time since walking in, Reynolds looks unsure. His stance isn't as rigid, his voice doesn't carry the same edge. David can feel the shift starting, even if Reynolds can't. And that's when David decides, it's time to end this on his terms. That's the moment where he reaches for something. Not his wallet, not his driver's license. Something else. Something Reynolds isn't expecting. Something that's about to turn this whole encounter upside down. David knows exactly what's happening. This isn't about safety, it's about control. Now, most people in his situation would do the easiest thing, pull out a wallet, flash a driver's license, and hope it ends quickly. But David knows the truth. Sometimes giving in doesn't make it end. Sometimes it just gives them more to dig into. And in this moment, David also knows something else. He's holding a card Reynolds doesn't expect. David doesn't reach for his driver's license. He doesn't reach for his work badge. Instead, he reaches for something that changes the entire conversation in less than 10 seconds. From a side pocket in his bag, David pulls out a leather case. It's the kind of case that feels heavy in the hand. The kind of case that doesn't just carry ID, it carries authority. He flips it open on the counter. And there it is, federal credentials, not local, not state, federal. The kind of clearance that means you've been vetted, trusted, and in certain situations, outrank the man standing in front of you. Reynolds' eyes flick down, then back up, then down again. And you can see the shift happen in real time. The squared shoulders relax, the hard line of his jaw softens, the clipped tone disappears. It's like watching a balloon deflate. David doesn't say a word, he doesn't have to. The badge says everything. Reynolds clears his throat, mutters something about just checking, tries to pivot into small talk like maybe if he smooths the edges, the moment will disappear. But David doesn't give him the out. "If there's nothing else," David says evenly, "I've got work to do." And that's it. Reynolds leaves. No apology, no real explanation, just the sound of the door closing behind him. If you're black in America, this isn't just a gotcha moment. It's a rare win in a game that's rigged more often than it's fair. Because too many times, the ending is different. Think about Earl Sampson, stopped 258 times in 4 years, most of them while he was at work, at the same store doing his job. Or Sandra Bland, pulled over for a minor traffic violation and never making it home. The system doesn't usually hand over these clean, quiet victories. But when it does, when someone like David can stand their ground without a raised voice, without cuffs, without it turning into something worse, it's a reminder of what should be normal, but is. And if you think that was wild, wait until you hear what happened when Reynolds found out who David really works for. Click here, you won't believe it. The power flipped in under a minute. Reynolds walked in thinking he was the one in charge. He walked out knowing he was. And David, he didn't just protect his own dignity. He showed everyone watching that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding all the cards. That's the kind of moment you remember. That's the kind of moment you replay in your head, not because it's dramatic, but because it's proof. Proof that assumptions can crumble in seconds. Proof that calm can be louder than a shout. Proof that you don't have to match aggression with aggression to win. Watch the next video. It's even crazier than this one.